who had once been, after World War II, had been in a place called Witonsky in Poland, and they were sharing stories. And one of the women, and the family that invited me to the wedding's name was Gorachowski, and we've been friends with them forever, and you'll see that in the film. But one of the women told a woman by the name of Toby told Ella Gorachowski this story about what happened when she was born and in her infancy, and how they didn't think she was going to live because the infant had pneumonia. Now we're talking about 1948, 44, 48. No medication. It's after the war. Medication is not available, especially in these DP camps in Poland. And so, but somehow or other, this infant's father found out that a family by the name of Gorachowski had penicillin. He got the penicillin, took it back to the hospital. 70 years later, at this wedding in Israel, sitting at the same table is the infant and the Gorachowski family, not the parents, they've since died, but, and I'm 80 and Ella's 79, so, and here's this story. So I thought, I have to go to Israel and make all the contacts. And the first time I went to Israel, Toby did not want to see me. So then I went back the second year, and because of my wonderful producer, Tal Barda, she made friends with Toby's daughter, and they both had kids the same age, and all of a sudden everything became koshered. And now the second year I came back, and it all went magnificently. So we filmed for 3.5 days. I was only there for 7 days. We filmed for 3.5 days, but Tal and Tomar, the cinematographer and the producer, did a lot of work to prepare for those few days. So it's the story that I'm telling. Thank you. And all kinds of questions afterwards, which I'm able to answer. By the way, there are things in here that I heard for the first time because I don't understand Hebrew. So all of a sudden I see things in film that I never heard, even though I was present, or just didn't understand. So anyway, and I'm so it took Tal, my director-producer, to connect with Toby's children, her daughter, and they had children, and then that's what broke the ice. Otherwise, she wouldn't have met with me again, I'm pretty sure. And Toby's husband and son were out of the country at the time. So, and my sister was supposed to come with me and couldn't at the last minute. So when you see us looking at the computer, that's my sister and brother-in-law in New Hampshire. So, being a total non-techie, it's amazing that one came off. So, but the Gorachowskis are good people. And there was earlier, I'll tell you a nice story about Chaim Gorachowski. For that long train ride, Chaim told me a story. He had saved 2 bags of bread. And so every night on the train, he would go to the engineer. And the engineer would give him hot water. And they would soak the bread. And that's what they ate. And that got them back to Poland. They also, from where they were in Siberia, they had no knowledge of what was going on with the war. So pretty much both Chaim and Pessy's families were pretty much wiped out in different concentration camps or just in the Warsaw Ghetto. And another coincidence, there's a picture of a man that came to our house, whose name just slipped out of my head.
Mr. Kenner.
Mr. Kenner, thank you. How he came to us, I don't know. But if there's a book, and I didn't bring it, there's a book about the Warsaw Ghetto and the hidden archives. And Kenner is in that book. So not only was he a survivor of the Holocaust, he was a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. I think there were some political movements involved in this, or I should say organizations, that my dad belonged to, that Kenner belonged to, and then there was the Joint Committee, but I didn't want to get into any of the politics of it. So this was just a coincidence. So I'll tell you something funny that I did. After we got the video, and it happened to be Friday the 13th in November, I took the video to the cemetery and put it on my parents' tombstone and played it for them. But all around my parents were people whose names I knew from my childhood. So it was just my husband and I and our dog, and hopefully somebody in that cemetery heard it. But I was just determined that my parents hear this. So, hear that, Mom? So, yes.
I'd appreciate if you could talk about the transportation of the shipping of these things. How was it that easy? They just went to a post office? Was there any kind of...
Well, we collected, just bulky stuff, and somehow or other, it would get to the post office, leaving Philadelphia, and lots of times I'm sure that everything that was in the bulky packages got picked. Things must have gotten picked out, because when Ella says she didn't know what penicillin was, and by the way, I contacted Merck and other pharmaceuticals, nobody answered us. So my daughter-in-law, Donna, and her daughter made those vials, made that vial of penicillin.
Donna is here.
Was not authentic. But, so they had nothing to do with us, the pharmaceuticals. So.
And at the bombed out apartment building, how did the family receive it? Did they have to go to a post office? And how long did it take for a package from shipping to arrival?
I assume it was 6 to 7 weeks, but my dad and Pessy were in correspondence all the time in Yiddish. So when Ella says they didn't know what it was, it could be that the penicillin got there before the next letter got there. But there was, and none of us, neither of my family or the Gorhovskys, have any of those letters. But the letters were flying back and forth. So again, we're talking 70 plus years ago. So, and there's a nice story there's just a lot of nice stories, but when the Gorhovskys finally got to Israel, well, it was Palestine, and I think a couple weeks later, it was voted in as a state. They came with nothing. They came with 5 children. Matuka, Hava is a twin, so she's 2 of the younger, and Ella was the oldest. And they came with nothing. So the kids went to different kibbutzim. Every one of those children was educated. 2 of them became nurses, and they all went through the army. But David, the guy in the movie who does this, he sold his car so that he could buy a business for his in-laws. And David is a 5th generation Sabra. So people were doing what people could do. And families were broken up, and they figured out ways to get them back together. But they were absolutely always in touch. And you know, Israel isn't that big. So I'll tell you another story about my parents, my mother in particular. My parents were in Israel. They made Aliyah in the early 70s, and they were there during the Yom Kippur War. I'm going, Mom, come home. You gotta come home. I can't come home. Why can't you come home? We have the only telephone in the building. And if you've been to Israel, you know it's less than the size of this table. So the soldiers at the front were sometimes 5 miles away. And so they would call them and tell their parents that they were okay. So my mother had the telephone, so she wasn't going home either. And my dad, who could barely walk, became a postman. So people did what people did, but the Gorohovskys took really good care of my parents. And in Chava's house, when my parents left Israel, they left a lot of things. So Chava has a chair that was my father's chair, and somehow a leather recliner that nobody's allowed to sit over. Yeah.
So your parents came to America to Philadelphia?
Yes. My mother was born in Philadelphia. My father was born in Lithuania. She was his nurse at Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai Hospital was at 5th and Reed in Philadelphia, in South Philadelphia. I think it was
Your father wasn't here.
No, he was born in Lithuania. But Mount Sinai Hospital, which is where she graduated from, was torn down, I think, about 35, 40 years ago. And I never heard about that.
Oh.
Until
I was going to ask you what made you pick that
I
name.
have no idea. The first time I heard it was there because, again, I don't understand Hebrew. So I thought, wow. So I don't know, is that a true story? Is it not a true story? Who knows? But,
Sam, you want to stand up?
Did the pharmaceutical companies cooperate with you?
absolutely not. No.
So if somebody was adopting a family or sponsoring a family and they knew they needed medication, did you have to go through a doctor to get it?
No, my mother got it somehow in the hospital. I mean, did the doctors give her vials from somebody and that weren't used? I don't know.
You have a question in the back?
Yeah. Yes?
Do you know anything about the Warsaw Ghetto?
Yes. And there's a whole book out about it, actually. And Mr. What's his name?
Kenner.
Kenner, thank you. Mr. Kenner was in a book about the Warsaw Ghetto. And what they did in the Warsaw Ghetto, aside from fighting and losing their lives, they had archives that they saved with pieces of paper, maybe a piece of paper this size, and they wrote a little history on it, and they hid it in tin cans and buried the tin cans. So right before the Germans came to wipe out the Warsaw Ghetto, these cans were hidden. And there's a book called
And who will write our history, isn't that the book?
Yeah,
I think that's,
the hidden archives of the Warsaw Ghetto.
There's also a movie that I saw at Kraft.
Same one.
Right, it's that one. I think it's.
Yeah, I missed it.
Who will write our history.
Yeah, I'm the professor from, I spoke with the kid, it was called Hyas, now it's called Hyas. They were very, very active in moving refugees, getting clothing and food for refugees. So there were lots of organizations, not to mention the Red Cross or anything like that, but there was a lot of help. And then, you know, people had families, I'm sure they helped them individually.
Right. And I thought you said that penicillin wasn't discovered until 48.
No, 26.
Oh, 26. Okay, I misheard.
Yeah, and then there's actually, I want to do it, I haven't done it yet. In New Orleans, there's a museum dedicated to World War II, and a good part of that museum is dedicated to penicillin.
Mhm.
So, because there was a big, they didn't know how to package it. At first, you know, here they had this miracle drug, but, well, you know, how were they going to begin to package it?
Right.
So different pharmaceutical companies figured out how to do it, but it really did, because the difference between World War I and World War II, soldiers were losing limbs due to bacteria and infection. World War II now, here was penicillin, so.
You had written a piece called about the vial with this story. So I just was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how it was inside of you to have this story and then to actually make this film that had been, you know, something that you've talked about this. And
I
then
couldn't
to see
help
the-
it. It wouldn't leave me. You know, have you ever had those things that you have an idea, or you think you have an idea, and, you know, let it go? Well, it didn't let go of me. And as long as I could finally meet with Toby, because I didn't have to meet with the Gorhovskys, but if I could finally meet with Toby, then that I thought was the important part. It was important for the Gorhovskys as well. So, that's how, it just wouldn't leave me alone. Yes? No? Yeah.
I wonder, you may not be able to answer this, how has Toby's family or the Gorhovskys or even yours, how have your lives changed since meeting each other? It might be too early to say.
Well, I don't know. I mean, of course, I'm still in touch with Elle and David, and they have one sister here, Shoshana, who's in Florida. I don't know, but I know that Toby is not well, and Ella and David are. I mean, I'm 80, so she's 79. David's probably 82, 83. So we're all up there. But they have a large family, and it's in their family now. They have a family archive with videos and whatnot. So, you know, it's either there or gone behind. So now the grandchildren, they outnumber us greatly. Yeah.
As Rabbi Shelley was saying, we've been on a theme the last few months of talking about light and the beauty of the light in the world. And I've probably read more about the Holocaust than any other topic. And in recent years, what's interested me is the positive side of the Holocaust. We tend to always focus on how horrible it was, but what's beautiful about your story is all the wonderful things that came from that. People that risked their lives to help Jews, to save Jews, and to do things like
Well, my parents were just doing it through the mail.
No, I know, but I think that's what Rochelle was getting at. Like, if somebody caught that mail and traced the mail back and asked why those medications were going through the mail, and
My sister thinks they were in coffee pot, tin coffee cans. So my parents probably opened up the coffee cans and put the vials in the coffee cans. But then again, the coffee could have been stolen, because coffee was, also, almost everything was gold. But as a kid, I knew that one vial of penicillin bought 5 pair of shoes.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
I didn't know the rest.
The other thing I just wanted to say is I'm a nurse, and so I was really touched by your mother's story.
Yeah, I mean, somebody gave it to her.
Well, you know what,
As a rabbit.
They're all dead.
no, but we do stuff like that all the time. You just do. The hospital never wants you to do that kind of stuff, but you just do it. Doctors do it, nurses do it, respiratory therapists do it. You just slip it to people and say, don't say where you got this from. But it's still, it's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing.
Soviet Union, we were looking for members of our family, which we didn't succeed in doing. But before I left, people said they use medicine, they need aspirin, which we got for 69 cents a bottle. And I was with my cousins and my uncles. And we brought all this stuff that we put together, and as we went to different parts of the Jewish community, different Jewish communities, we gave them what we had. I didn't even know what the medications were for, but I was giving them, a doctor friend of mine gave them to me, gave them samples from distributors. And people were tremendously grateful. And this was, 20 years ago, people were still desperate for medication.
Yeah.
I would like you to not be so self-deprecating about your family. They spent the time it took to think of how to do it. Then they
I was a
spent.
kid when I said that.
You just said it now.
No, well, you qualified with just. So we're trying to take out whatever the just is.
So what they did was they thought, they made a plan, they found the money, they found the source. It was like a military campaign that they did, and it worked. They saved a life. So it's a
And more than
miracle.
one, I mean, a lot of, my father was a socialist and a kibbutznik.
Of course.
So,
Who
you know, a
else?
lot of that went into, once they could get into Palestine/Israel, then things would move more easily. But on the ship that the Gorohovskys went to Israel, to Palestine on, sounded like, it just sounded terrible.
I'm sure that
Dirty.
everyone that joins me would be
Rickety.
delighted
Exactly, they got.
that you had an obsession. You followed up, and what a wonderful story, but also what a phenomenal cinematographer you hired. Magnificent.
I mean, all this, the last scene at the dining table, and that was at Chava's house. I mean, that took him all morning to set up, just to put the lighting in. And so, and I had nothing to do with the editing, nothing.
But you contacted, you made it happen.
Yeah, but I'll tell you when I started, you're saying other places, medications are difficult. Tal did another video, actually she won an award for it. This is not for, this can only be shown in places like this, because there's footage there that we don't own. So it can't go beyond this. But Tal did a film, a documentary a couple of years ago about Israeli heart surgeons that go into Africa and bring out children who need heart surgery. Why do they need heart surgery? Because they got a cold and they didn't have an aspirin. And so it morphed into heart problems. So these Israeli doctors are going in. They do a lot of surgery in different African countries, but then sometimes they have to bring the kids and their families back to Israel. My dad was out there, meetings, blustering, making a lot of noise and all kinds. She was the quiet one, and went back to work. And the date that January 26, 1946 was important was because it was the date my brother was born. So she goes back to work 2 years later. Of course, we had a Bubba and a grandmother who were there to help take care of us, and my sister and I were in school. But I think she might not have gone back to work if she didn't have this other intention on the side. So how do we get penicillin to these children in Africa?
Send it in boxes.
You have to know where to send it.
So I want to. For you, our Pecky.
Okay, thank you.
And your name Pecky comes from Your real name is,
Florence.
right? How you got the name Pecky?
Okay. When I was born, as the story goes, my sister, who's 3 years older, for whatever reason was climbing under a table, and my grandmother had a hot tea on the table. So my sister must have hit the leg of the table. The pot spilled, she burned her leg, and when my dad took us to bed, he would put her on his back, and he would say in Yiddish to my mother, who was definitely not a Yiddishist, but this she got, "Gib mir mein zweite Peckel." Give me my second package. So my real name is Florence. If you see a check from me, it says Florence. But I haven't grown into Florence.
Little Peckala. So this was a huge gift. I was saying this season, we were saying of light that Mendel lifted up, and I was thinking as Hanukkah starts next week, the miracle of what your family did. You know, as we spin our dreidels and the letters of Nes Gadol Hayasham, a great miracle happened there. But there's also in Israel, where they were all speaking Hebrew, Nes Gadol Hayapo, a great miracle happened here. So you have brought, your family brought a miracle and miracles into the world. So one more, thank you.
If you're someone of my generation, maybe you have memories of what maybe your parents did. And I think they're worthwhile stories to just jot down, just a little piece of paper, and then it won't let go.
So I know Pecky will be available to talk, but there's food out there, and just chat with one another. We use name tags so we can use each other's names, and we'll close with Olam Chesed, like this. Olam Chesed Yivaneh.